Okay, cool. So if you were just tuning in, this is where I share a video a day telling different stories about moments in my life that moved me away from conservatism, from being a homeschooled conservative kid to not at all being that anymore. We left off in high school, so we can pick back up there. Another formative moment in my high school experience, at least, was when I was a senior in high school. I was 17 years old. I wasn't able to vote yet, but I went and I volunteered with this program that was run through like a Christian conservative organization that but basically, like, they did a ton of different things. The one thing that, like, I did with them is that they would do, like, right before an election, they would have, like, teenagers volunteer to do, like, phone banking, door knocking, handing out flyers for a certain candidate, that type of thing. It was only ever for certain Christian conservative candidates. It wasn't just for, like, candidates in general. And so I did that when I was in. And like a core memory of that experience that I walked away from was, it was like early in the morning, right before we were about to like start our day. There was a bunch of like volunteers all together in like a room. People were like, I think it was like breakfast time. I think I was like getting like breakfast or something like that. And there was this table with a bunch of like teenage boys who were also volunteers who were sitting there with this older man who was probably at least like 50s, 60s plus. And he wasn't with the organization or anything like that. I think he was just like a volunteer who happened to be there that day. And he's like having a conversation with all these boys, and he's like laughing and joking with them, all this kind of stuff, like having a great time. He like pulls out his wallet. He starts like handing them each like $20 bills, being like, thank you so much for all of the work that you're doing, like blah, 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 blah. And I was like, oh, that's really nice of him to just like give out money like that. Wow, that's really nice. And so I was like over at the buffet getting some food, and the older man walks up to me. And he gets really, really like uncomfortably close to me and comes and like whispers in my ear, not very quietly, but he decides to come and like whisper in my ear, and he tells me, hey, I can see your underwear through your pants. And like, I was so weirded out by that. I was like so uncomfortable by that. And not like, he said it too, like, he said it too in like a way that like he liked that he was able to see like my underwear through my pants, in kind of like a, I don't know, it was just weird, gross, dirty old man shit. I don't understand it. Yeah, so he does that. I was super uncomfortable. I didn't really know what to do. I don't even think I said anything. I think I just like got up and like walked away. I didn't tell anyone about that. I didn't really like know how to handle that. I was just very young. I was just like incredibly uncomfortable with that. And a few different things that I noticed. The way that men and boys were treated in these environments were often a lot more positive than the way that girls were treated. I'm sure that men in Republican spaces have been sexually harassed before, but I know that women in Republican spaces have been sexually harassed, and that's not like a particularly uncommon thing as well. Another thing that I noticed with it is that the Republican Party has a plethora of dirty old men. Obviously, this is 2025. We all know that. Look at like pretty much anyone Trump hangs out with. Trump himself, dirty old man, 100%. But at the time when I was like 17 years old, I didn't really like understand that. And obviously like, I'm sure, I've never worked in a Democrat's campaign before, but I'm sure that there's like sexual harassment that happens in any environment, 100%, like no doubt about that. But I can just say from my own experience that I could just go and exist in the world, and like, yes, you experience sexual harassment as a woman, that happens, but I experience such higher rates of sexual harassment in Republican spaces. And the rate of just like misogynistic, creepy old, like dirty ass men is so high. And I know that's not everyone's experience. I know that like a lot of people would be able to say a completely different story about their life, and that's totally fair. That's totally valid. I hope that no one ever experiences sexual harassment. All I can say is that when I was young and when I was in these spaces, that was not something that was uncommon. That was something I started to just like get used to, because it was like, that's just kind of the way that people are. Even in that same scenario, the guy that we were campaigning for. He ended up winning his election. He had like a victory party at the end. I was at the victory party. It was like me, the rest of the teenagers who had showed up to volunteer, and then like a bunch of adults. Most of the adults being like 40s, 50s, 60s plus. And I had like weird old men like checking me out. I had weird old men asking me if I wanted a drink. I had weird old men like making little comments about like all this kind of stuff. It honestly, my mind, I blocked half of it out. It was just like a really confusing time to just be 17 years old and having these old men ask you, say all of these really uncomfortable things to you. I finally was like, okay, I go and I like have this conversation with this person who is a staffer for the guy that was running. We have a great conversation. I'm like, wow, this is so nice. I'm not being sexually harassed by anyone. That's fantastic. He was like, oh, hey, like, let me get your number. And I'm like, oh, this is awesome. Maybe I will get like an internship out of this. Maybe this is just like networking. I don't really know how to network, but that sounds good. And then the guy texts me later and like asks me out. This guy, I was like 17, so maybe he was like younger than he looked like to me, but my impression at that time was like, this guy's like 35. Like, this guy is like so much older than me. Also, I was really proud of the fact that I was like 17 years old, not able to vote yet, and I was campaigning to help encourage other people to go vote because I didn't have the ability to do that yet. And I told so many people that. I don't know if I told this specific guy that, but also he should have known that I was like in the group of people that were the teenagers that signed up to volunteer. I wasn't like even an adult at that point. Anyways, those are just some of my own experiences, just specifically from this time when I was in high school. And going back to what we were talking about last time, talking about different themes of things that I noticed, one of the themes that I noticed was that, wow, the Republican Party has a plethora of dirty old men and like men who like generally are like very misogynistic and don't respect women. And once again, that's not everyone's experience. I totally respect other people's experiences, but that was something that I very distinctly took away in that moment and remembered.